Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And today I'm bringing you another interview episode. My guest today is fellow podcaster, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and mentor to visionaries, Steven Fredlund. For 30 years, Steve has been a problem solver, strategist, and catalyst whose insights have powered breakthroughs around the world through Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits. Steve loves helping individuals, organizations, and communities with their unique situations by focusing on happiness and increasing capacity for better decision-making, problem-solving, and strategy development. Like me, Steve is on a mission to help leaders become happier, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about his approach. So welcome, Steve, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show today.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate that.
It's going to be so much fun.
I'm looking forward to it. I know.
Steve, I know you hold a master's in business administration, but how did you end up serving leaders the way you do today? Can you please just tell us a little bit about your backstory and your entrepreneurial journey so far?
Sure. Yeah. Real high level. I'm a math nerd. So I was a math nerd in high school. And so I went to college because that's what I was supposed to do, right?
Sure.
And then after college, I became an actuary. So said, hey, you're good at math, you should be an actuary. So I became an actuary, which is, if people don't know, it's basically an accountant, but without the personality. Like it's really like very introverted, mathematics centric, analytical stuff. And so I did that for like 25 years in various capacities with different organizations. So I was in the corporate world for about 25 years. I did a fair amount of nonprofit work as well, kind of in parallel to that on a volunteer basis. And then about 4 years ago, I left the corporate world, decided to go it on my own. I've always had a real passion for helping smaller communities become more vibrant. Even though I was in the corporate world, I always felt like these aren't really my people, good people, but not my people. I'm a small town, rural guy, fifth generation in the same community. And so I really wanted to help these communities that were, even before COVID, starting to shut down. Their main streets were shutting down. The small businesses were boarding up and all of those things. I just had a heart for helping those people. And so I just surrounded myself with my friends and family and said, all right, how can I best contribute to this? I'm not a political person. I'm not a city planner. That's not what I am. What can I do? And where we landed was really helping these smallest businesses. So I call what we do small business, because I really want to help these entrepreneurs, the aspiring entrepreneurs, the mom and pop shops, the people, just a few employees, help them become more successful. Because then if they're more successful, they're the people that are inside of these communities. They live there, eat there, work, they play there, volunteer there, all of those things. If they can be more successful, the communities become more vibrant. And so I shifted about 4 years ago to really focusing on helping these entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs be successful.
I love that. That's such a great story. And thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for inspiring those people who need it the most, because those are the ones, the solopreneurs, the ones who are just starting out. If they're already a big company, they're already successful, yeah, there will be the ups and downs, but they know what they do. But when you're just starting out, you really need the support and people who can give you some tips or just support you along the way.
Yeah, and usually what's available to those folks is sort of the free program. At least here in the US, there's a lot of great free government help for startups and nonprofits and small businesses, but it's free, which means they're not really paying people to do a great job with it. So it's good-hearted people that are trying to help, but they don't have the same level of experience. that somebody like myself might have. And so small business owners kind of get the scraps of what's left over in the coaching, consulting, mentoring world. And so that's where I was trying to say, what is that gap that I can fill? Well, here's all of these people like that you described that need this level of support. They really they need it because their family and friends don't really get what it means to run a business. They don't really have that level of support. And so what's available to them is kind of the free stuff, which isn't that great, honestly, to get there. So I'm thinking, how can I help increase that level of support that they get? Help give them the level of support that's usually only available for, like you said, the bigger companies. And so that's the niche that I'm trying to fill, is increase that level of support that they get.
And I really like also how you focus on building a community, because it can feel very lonely to be an entrepreneur, especially if your family and friends don't get what you're trying to do and they're not in the same space and they just see it as a waste of time what you're trying to do, and they're like, why don't you get a real job?
Yeah, I didn't realize the extent to which it was sort of lonely and on your own, even if you're in a job where you're surrounded by people, until I went through it myself, because of exactly what you're talking about. My family and my friends don't really get it. Like, they all just have regular jobs. And I had a really good job, paying well, Fortune 500 company. Like, what in the world are you doing? Are you crazy? And then, I try to explain, hey, what do you do? If you say I'm an actuary, or I'm a dentist, or I'm a whatever, people kind of get that. When you say, well, I'm an entrepreneur and I do coaching and consulting and training, and, people are like, what? I don't really get it, And so it is kind of a lonely thing. And so I've been really intentional for myself about finding those people that I can surround myself with, that I can bounce ideas off of, or that understand who I am. And so, yeah, like you said, I've embedded that into how I coach and consult with others.
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset, that's for sure. Now, when you look back at your journey, what key decisions have really changed the trajectory of your life? I mean, most people have at least, I would say, probably one or two key decisions that really changed everything for them. So what were those decisions for you?
Yeah, I could probably give you 20 of them, so I won't bore you with all of that. But a couple of things come to mind right away. One is actually choosing to get involved in my nonprofit work in Rwanda, Africa. And we could talk for hundreds of hours about that, but just the decision to do that, and what I learned about myself, and what I learned about humanity, and what I learned about community and the collective we, has radically transformed my life, how I do business, all of those things. So that's one area. I would say the other is about 15 years ago, I was just incredibly unhappy, even though my life on paper was perfect. Right. So I had, just gotten promoted at the Fortune 500 company. My relationship with my wife, my kids was great. Everything on paper was amazing, but I was totally miserable. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to somebody I considered a mentor and said, what is going on here? I don't understand what is happening. And I felt like I had no right to be upset, no right to be unhappy, because, man, I'm a middle-aged white male in the United States, and I've got a great job and a great family. Like, what right do I have to be unhappy? And so the decision to reach out to that mentor, I could have just kind of kept, that inside and just fought through it and just kind of, gone to the coal mine every day and, be really noble that way. But the decision to reach out to the mentor, and then the insights that came out of that, changed how I approached my career, how I viewed alignment with who I am with my job, and all of these things. And ultimately, I think that decision to do that ultimately led to me leaving the corporate world 4 years ago.
This is such an important topic, because I think that happens so many times to so many people. It just looks so perfect on the outside, and then they feel guilty for not being happy. And it's just this vicious cycle that makes them feel miserable, and even more miserable for feeling miserable. And so
Right.
it's really tough to get out of that cycle again. And it's something that I help my clients with as well, because this happens a lot, even though not that many people talk about it. And now, fun question. So what do you think your life would look like in a parallel universe where you made different decisions at those critical points? Where would you be in your life right now?
Oh man, that is a fun question. Yeah, I mean, the first one with Rwanda, I would not have the same level of gratitude. I would not have the same understanding of the power of surrounding yourself with the right people and the collective we. So I'd probably be even more introverted and more of a loner than I already am. I'm naturally bent that way as an introvert. And so I've got to kind of fight against that already. And I think if I didn't really understand the value of that and how much that improved my life, I think I'd be even more lonely, I think. And the second one, if I'd never reached out to the mentor, I mean, eventually maybe I would have had to, either a mentor or a therapist, because it was pretty rough. But if I envision a world where I never told anybody about my internal unhappiness and just kind of kept continuing with that great life on paper and misery inside and stayed in that job, I'd been promoted to a job, which as a result of that, I ended up backing out of that promotion, going back to an individual contributor role. If I had stayed in that role, I mean, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't really know. I would have been so miserable. I probably would have crashed and burned and left the corporate world in a much worse way than I did. You know, eventually I could leave it on my terms because I was able to find the jobs that fit me until I had to leave. If I had not reached out to somebody and actually gotten that help and declared sort of, here is my problem, I think I would have eventually reached a point where, who knows? I mean, I'd hate to even kind of look at what that would have looked like.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made those decisions and you're happy with them.
Yeah.
Now, I know that making those decisions can be really, really tough in the moment. So when it comes to making those important decisions in your life, how do you personally approach those decisions? Do you let yourself be guided by your intuition? Are you very rational and you write your pros and cons on your lists? Or do you do a little bit of both? Or just can you share a little bit about your decision-making process?
Yeah, mine is a more analytical approach. So sometimes it does involve pros and cons. I'm a kind of an optimizer is how I solve problems and how I make decisions. And so it really, like, for the example of, you know, should I quit this job, this promotion I just got, right? So I had the conversation with the mentor. It led me down this road of realizing I wasn't aligned. Who I was wasn't aligned with what I was being asked to do. And so I was at a crossroads of what do I do? Do I leave the company? Do I tell them I no longer want the promotion? Like, what do I do here? And so for me, it was figuring out how do I make that decision, was figuring out what are the different options that I could do. And really, you know, brainstorming and not just assuming there's one path or two paths, but saying, all right, what are all the potential things that I could do here? I could do this, you know, part-time, full-time, this company, that company, switch gears, you know, whatever it is, think of all the potential options. And then, for each one, figure out what are the pros and cons of that. And really being honest and clear about who I am and what I want out of life. And how do each of those decisions line up with what I actually want out of life? Not, you know, part of this was, you know, figuring out what do I actually want out of life? Who am I actually? Because we have, at the time, you know, I had 40 years of, you know, being inundated with messages about what I should want out of my life and what the world expects of me and what my mom wants and what my wife wants and what my family expects and what people think is crazy or not crazy. So, you know, you have all of this baggage that we carry around the kind of life that we should live. I always say we allow ourselves to be should on, you know, we should, hey, you should, I should. And so I had to really scrape that stuff away and be honest about who am I? What do I really want? And once I figured that out, then look at all the different possible solutions. And so then it was an optimization problem of saying which solution, I know, I'm an analytic, I can't get out of it. But, you know, which solution actually brings me closest to what I want out of my life in a real honest, transparent way.
I think you and I think very much alike because that's pretty much the same approach that I took as well. So I was
okay, good. So I'm not as crazy as I maybe think I am.
No, not at all. At least not to me.
Right. Well, we have each other, I guess.
Yeah. I was also on this path just where I did everything that people expected me to do, like go to university, get a degree, do all the right things, you know, tick all the boxes, and then eventually I found myself in a place where I just wasn't happy. So I also had to have this like really hard look at what am I doing? What do I even want to do? Because up to that point, a lot of people, they just don't ask themselves what they really want, right? They just go through the motions, they do what they are expected to do, until they find themselves in this place where they are just so unhappy that they can't keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think, you know, some people get lucky, I think, that what they end up doing is really aligned with who they are. And so then I think they can look at you and say, what's wrong with you? Just do your job. Because they kind of got lucky, right? There's variance in life. Life is about making decisions, and then there's the variance. And I think one of those variance pieces is just, do you like your job? Do you happen to like your job when you weren't intentional about choosing your job? And so I think it's almost like my wife and I talk about this, but we got married really young. And I feel like, we just got lucky that it worked out. Like some people get married as young as we were. A lot of those don't work out. We just got lucky that it did happen to work out. It's not necessarily anything magic about what we did, even though people in our situation would go on tour and write books and all those kind of things. We never really thought that. I think it's the same thing about your job. And I use the analogy of it's like our backbone. When we're not intentional about doing things, we have this risk of getting misaligned between who we truly are and what we're actually doing in the world with our job. And it's like our back in terms of, as I've gotten older, I've started getting a little bit of back pain, here and there. And it's a cumulative effect of things not really being lined up in your back. And so, you start getting a little bit irritable, you start losing sleep, you start getting headaches, and eventually you just become really miserable. And I think that's how it is in life with our job. It can be this cumulative effect of these things being a little bit off. And then we need to go to the chiropractor. We need to get it realigned. And I think that's the moment that I went through. It sounds like it's the moment that you went through. It sounds like it's a moment that other people need to go through is, man, go get realigned. If you don't want to sit there and live with that miserable, chronic misalignment, take action.
That's a great analogy. And I think, well, I was intentional when I chose to become a biologist because I loved science and I loved biology. But what I didn't really understand at that point in time was the lifestyle that would be associated with choosing that path and just being in the lab 24/7, which was something. So I didn't like the lifestyle. I still liked the science. I liked, the topics. But yeah, the lifestyle is also something that we all have to consider when we make those choices. Sometimes it's not just about finding the themes that we're excited about, because they can lead us down a path that we're not happy with in the end, right?
That's so good. Yeah. For me, I still love actuarial science. I love the math. I love doing all the problem solving. So for me, it wasn't going to a lab. For me, it was, when you're a good individual contributor, the natural course of things is to become a manager, right? That's, and you get offered a promotion, and of course you take it, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. Why would you not take a promotion? That's the entire corporate game is work hard, get promoted, right? And so what I found for me personally, and I think maybe some of your audience would resonate with this, is I hated management. I hate management. I love people, but I hate management. Like, I just want to tell people, well, we all know our jobs, just go do your jobs. I don't want to have weekly meetings and all these touch bases and all these things that which a good manager would have. I just didn't like that side of it. I didn't like the political side of it. I didn't like, now I've got to go and work on budgeting and all this kind of stuff. Like, I just did not like being in management. And so you could look at that and say, well, that's a failure. Just like you could look at the lab thing and say, well, that's a failure. You're not really a true biologist if you don't like being in the lab 24/7. Or you say, no, I'm a biologist. It's just not, this part of it is not wired, is not consistent with who I am. And I think, we feel like we apologize for that. I did. I felt like I had to apologize for that, or there's something wrong with me because I didn't want to be a manager. I love visionary leadership. I love the individual problem solving. I just didn't like the management side of it. Does that make me a bad human? No, but I had to fight that. Because that was my initial reaction, was there's something wrong with me because I don't like the management. And maybe that's the same thing that you kind of ran into. And I think a lot of people, as I've shared this message with a lot of people, they have that same feeling. What's wrong with me that I don't like doing that? Nothing is wrong with you. You are just aware of who you are and that is not aligned with that.
Exactly. And I think one crucial thing that I have learned about decision making over the years is that even if I'm scared about venturing outside of my comfort zone, I shouldn't make decisions based on fear alone. So the way I see it, as long as we make fear-based decisions, we limit our growth and we don't live up to our full potential. And I'm not saying be reckless and do everything that you're afraid of, but if you feel that in order for you or your business to grow, you need to do something that scares you, it might be investing, it might be building a team, it might be delegating, it might be becoming a speaker or starting your own podcast or something else that makes you really uncomfortable. Even though you know it's the right thing to do, those are the moments where you don't want to listen to that fear that is holding you back. Because if you know it's the right thing to do and you're not putting yourself in any real danger, then go for it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So what are some good guidelines for leaders to base their decisions on that will lead them to more happiness and fulfillment?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal insight that you just had. I think one of the things that I really preach is, get clear on who you are, what you want, whether that's personally or out of your business. Just get real crystal clear. I'm a big believer in the Einstein idea that he said if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes on the problem, 5 minutes on the solution. I think just lack of clarity, I think is undermining a lot of our personal discomfort and a lot of our small business lack of success, is that we're not really clear on who we are and what we want, where we want to go, how we want to get there, all of those things. And so I would say get crystal clear on that. But then once you're clear on that, then you have to be intentional about making those decisions, solving problems, creating strategies that are in alignment with that, including in those cases where you have to overcome fear. And I think that's part of why I encourage people, when you're solving a problem, when you're thinking about an opportunity, developing a strategy, what we said earlier, brainstorm all the possible ways that this could be done. And don't add in those self-limiting beliefs like fear into those things there. Just think about maybe podcasting, speaking, just let it go. Put it down there as a possible option. And don't start saying, oh, I couldn't do that. That was scary. Just put it down. And then let the process determine what the optimal solution is for you. And yeah, I think fear is a big thing. I think there's two things that get in the way. Well, there's a lot of things, but a couple of things that get in the way of making the most optimal decisions. And you'll hear that word, and I know it sounds technical, but I love that idea of optimal. I just think if every person, if every individual, if every small business, every decision, solution, strategy was like 1 or 2% better than it normally is, man, you'd just be rocking. But I think when you're making decisions, a couple of things get in the way. One is the fear of, man, I've never done this. I don't know. That sounds scary. The other piece is just being super casual about decision making. I'm just such a believer we have to make more intentional decisions. I think a lot of times we're looking for a solution instead of the solution. And so, we do things by default all the time. I talk a lot about default-driven leadership. We just do things because it's the way they've always been done, right?
Yeah.
I use this kind of toothpaste because that's what my family used growing up. And I think we make our decisions in our business the same way. We do it that way. We do it because people expect us to do a certain thing, or that we should do a certain thing. And so we make all of these decisions that aren't really intentional. And I think if we just take a little bit longer, just take a pause on every decision and just say, is this the most optimal decision based on who I am, what I want out of the business, what I want out of my life? I think we're going to be more optimal. And part of that is going to be overcoming that fear. And like you said, I'm kind of rambling here, but like what you said, these things are not really going to hurt us, right? I mean, I've been chased by elephants, right? I've had silverback gorillas hit me in the head. Like, these are things that are like, oh my gosh, this might end right now. I mean, things like going up and speaking. I know I'm a speaker, so it's maybe not fair, but the first few times I spoke, oh my gosh, I'm an introverted actuary. I don't want to do that. Or the first time I did a podcast, or any of these things are scary. And for me, even like going to a mixer, right? I hate going to like networking events where the whole purpose is to, hey, how many kids you got? What's your dog's name? Like I hate it, but I do it, and there's success in it because I build these relationships. And so over years, you kind of get more accustomed to that, and it's not as scary.
Yeah, I love that. I think intention and inspired, aligned action, they are so powerful.
Yeah.
When you can focus on just those bits and pieces, you're pretty good, right?
Well, everything comes down to, of course, it's a formula, right? But I've got all this stuff I can say about different things. We've talked about a lot of it, but clarity plus intentionality equals happiness. Like, really, that's what it is. If you are clear on who you are, what you want, and you are intentional about making decisions that align to that clarity, that's where happiness resides. Happiness resides at the intersection of who I am and what I'm actually experiencing, right? Like, think about anything that we're happy about. It's because things are how we think they should be. And anything we're unhappy about is because things
true.
aren't how we want them to be. Like, it's not that complicated, right? Like, I mean, COVID hits and all of a sudden there's a lot of unhappiness because we don't think the world should be like that, right? That makes us unhappy. Our child succeeds at a sport. Man, that's what we want to happen. So things are aligned. That makes us happy. And I think, how do you get those things to come into alignment? How do we get our actual reality to line up with our desired reality? Clarity and intentionality.
Yeah, taking inspired action.
Yeah, I love that phrase. I'm going to steal that.
Go for it, because
Right.
it's really it's the clarity, it's the intention, and then it's also the taking action. Because what I see happening a lot, especially with people who believe in the whole manifesting thing, they just stop at creating a vision and then they don't take action. But that's usually not how it works. You usually can't just sit on your sofa and, think yourself happy or think yourself successful. You do have to do something to get there.
Yeah, I tell people I've got a tennis ball right here as a reminder for me. I always tell people, you are not a ball. Like, I think we like the ball, you set a ball down on a table or on a floor and it's just going to stay there forever, right? Nothing's going to happen unless some external force comes in and moves it. It's the whole, object in motion tends to stay in motion, object at rest tends to stay at rest unless impacted by an outside force. And so a ball is just going to sit there waiting for somebody to pick it up, to throw it, for a wind to blow, for the place to burn down. If none of that happens, it's going to stay there forever. And I think sometimes that's what we do in our lives. We just sit there waiting, hoping that the wind is going to blow, hoping that somebody's going to come and pick us up. And the reality is we're not a ball. We actually have that internal agency. We have control where we can start and stop and change direction more than we realize. So instead, we kind of live and lead like we're a ball waiting for something to happen. And, hope is an incredibly powerful thing. And maybe that's what you're getting at. Like, hope is great, right? I mean, we hope for a lot of things. I hope, goodwill for the people of Ukraine. And I hope that the pandemic gets over. And I hope that my kids are happy and successful. And I hope that your podcast crushes, and I mean, I hope for a lot of things, but hope is not a strategy.
That's right.
It's not. I mean, it's just not. It's powerful, but it's not a strategy. And to your point, we can all sit on our couch and say, man, I hope I make $1 million. Yeah, I hope so too. I hope so too. I hope everybody listening to this makes, 10 times what they're making now, myself included. But that hope is not going to manifest itself into anything, in my opinion. Now, some people might take a different perspective on that, and good for you. If that's how you live your life, do it, live it, whatever. My experience tells me, right or wrong, that hope is not a strategy. And I think we do a disservice when we tell people, yeah, if you just hope for something enough, it's going to happen. I haven't seen that happen regularly enough to believe that is an effective strategy.
Yeah, me neither. I think you need both sides of the equation. You need the belief, the hope, the faith, the vision, and you also need the action. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, vision. I mean, vision is powerful. Hope is powerful. Those are great things. But I think vision and hope without action is just dreaming. I forget the quote. Somebody had a quote like that. And, action without vision is just passing time.
True.
You need them both, right? I mean, if you don't have a vision,
both.
you're just doing things, like that's the whole Alice in Wonderland thing. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Like, you need to have vision. You need to have hope. You need to have, here's what I want out of my life, not out of my business, and in a real, true, authentic way. But that isn't enough. Now, how are you going to structure your business? How are you going to build the relationships? How are you going to bring the people into your life? How are you going to learn and educate yourself in a way that's aligned with that? So yeah, the taking inspired action, I think is the right thing. But yeah, it's both for sure.
Yeah. And I know that is often easier said than done. And we all know that especially leadership can be a struggle. Many leaders feel overwhelmed and they feel insecure and they doubt themselves more often than they would like to admit. And oftentimes they're so afraid to just, look unprofessional or weak that they keep all their struggle and doubts to themselves, and they just wear this perfect mask, this facade, and pretend that they're completely in control all the time. And the more they do this, the more they feel like imposters and fear that people might find out about their real feelings. So this can lead to a lot of internal pressure that can really affect their mental and physical health in the long run. And that's why I think it's so important to really normalize the struggle they experience and talk about it so that they don't feel that constant pressure to be perfect, to have all the answers all the time, to have everything figured out, and to always be the smartest person in the room. So maybe can you share a little bit of your personal leadership story here and how you evolved to become the leader you are today? And maybe tell us a little bit about your personal struggles with this and how did you resolve those issues?
Yeah, I think you hit it right in the head with what that sort of culture that's set by a lot of executives, especially in Fortune 500 companies. I actually literally had a C-level executive say to me one time, because I was leading a meeting, whatever, and somebody asked a question. I said, man, that is good. That is really interesting insight. We haven't actually explored that, but we're going to. We're going to figure that out. I don't know if it'll work, but let's figure that out. We're going to take it back and look at that. And afterwards, he just berated me. He said, you cannot, that is showing weakness. You need to have every answer. You need to tell people, no, we looked at that, whether you did or not. You just need to lie to people. You need to tell people you cannot show weakness. And that's when I realized I'm not really ever going to be a successful Fortune 500 company leader, or at least in this organization. But that is it. And I think he knows he's lying. He knows he's making stuff up for the sake of appearing to be strong. And I think, so what happens is you set that culture, you start to attract people like that, other people that want to have that same thing. And you create this entirely toxic culture where nobody is willing to show weakness. Nobody's willing to be vulnerable. And you're all just a bunch of robots walking around trying to impress each other. Mm-hmm. And maybe that works for people that want to have that kind of existence. But for anybody that comes into that group, into that department, that division, that doesn't align with that wants to feel like, man, I'm in a learning mode. I'm willing to share where I'm weak and where, that just kills culture. And you see what happened in their productivity, frankly, and in their retention rates. So I think that kind of leadership was a good model for me to realize, well, that's kind of leader I don't want to be. I know that, but that was part of my journey to happiness, was really figuring out what kind of leader do I want to be? I do love visionary leadership. And, I'm one of these folks that, if I get involved in something, I end up becoming a leader of it because I want to help, I want to serve, and to a detriment, frankly, in my part. But I had to decide, okay, if I'm going to lead, what is this leadership going to look like? And then being able to communicate that. If I'm inside of a company, if people say, hey, we'd love to have you come in, and like I've started departments or whatever, I'm like, okay, now I know myself well enough where I can say, yeah, I'm happy to do that, but here's what it's going to look like. And it might be different than anything you've ever seen. So you need to be comfortable with this. And so just being clear with them and managing expectations with them is huge. And now, even as I'm running the small business, and I've got people on the team that are involved, my leadership with them, is my communication with them is also around, here's how I lead. I'm not a micromanager. If you need somebody that's going to do this, I'm here if you ever need me. Like, I'm here if you ever need me. But really, I want to take this and throw it over the wall and say, you go run with it. And if that's not comfortable for you, it might not be a good fit. And now I might say, well, that's not great leadership, but it's who I am. It's the reality. Like, I could tell them I'm going to do something different. I could set up, meetings every 2 weeks or whatever, but I know that I'm not going to stick with it. So I think what I've learned is just, I need to be true to who I am, how I want to lead, and then figure out what's the optimal strategy based on that. So, but it's all about, how do I become happier? Not that my own personal happiness is the who'sness of the muchness, is like, that's the end goal of the entire world, is that I'm happy. But I know that if I'm happy in what I'm doing, that's going to create a more happy work environment, a more happy culture, happier relationships. Like, everything else benefits from us being happy.
I totally agree. And now that we talk a little bit about all those struggles, I'm curious, what do you see as your biggest success in your life so far, and why?
Yeah, I come back to my work in Rwanda. So I started a nonprofit in 2009. A couple of years earlier, started thinking about this, but ended up taking 4 trips to Rwanda, leading different teams over there. And the whole goal was to do 2 things. One is to have impact over there. What started with the AIDS pandemic in sub-Saharan Africa became really community transformation and sustainability for one area of northern Rwanda. So wanted to have impact over there in Africa. I'm in the United States. And the other piece, though, is I wanted to do something that would actually promote unity in my area of East Central Minnesota. it can be a very divisive area, rural Minnesota, with political and religious and schools and all these kind of things. It can be very divisive. And so I wanted to do something that would unite the people of East Central Minnesota. And so, I went through this. It was about a 12-year project where we had a huge impact. We raised more than $3 million out of rural Minnesota. Wow. No paid staff, no overhead, no major donors. And we had an amazing impact over there. Like the community is so radically transformed now, set up for generations to come. And so I'm proud of all of that. But I think what I really learned through all of that is just the power of a clear and compelling vision. And I'm such a believer in this as a leader. I think the most successful leaders are going to come out of the nonprofit sector, because I couldn't threaten people with paychecks. I couldn't offer them jobs. I mean, all I could do is say, yeah, I want you to give your time and your money to this vision. Like, you have to lead with the vision and ownership and engagement and belonging and, this movement and momentum and being part of something bigger than yourself. And so what I'm proud of is both things were accomplished, at least to some degree, right? I mean, unity is a hard thing to maintain, but we saw those things where people that would never talk to each other came together for the purpose of helping the people of Rwanda. And then we saw the impact over there. So, a lot of things I'm proud of in my life, a lot of things I'm not proud of, but that work in Rwanda is one that I'll forever hang my hat on.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. And thank you so much for doing that work and for having this huge impact, because you are really changing lives. And this is just absolutely wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah,
so
and
much.
it is. I mean, it's really humbling to go there, and every time I go there and you talk to the people and see what's been done, and you realize the impact it has. It's what the community did for that, and it was very humbling. And I'm not somebody who likes to say I'm proud of myself, but in those moments, I was very proud of myself. But also, what happens is that people then listen to this and they're like, oh, well, I'm not doing anything in Africa. And I tell people, man, you don't need to do the big stuff. Like, if you want to have an impact in the world, you don't need to go to Africa. You don't need to do all this stuff. Just, if you're in Minnesota in the winter, shovel your neighbor's driveway, offer to get groceries for somebody during COVID. Like, just say a kind word to the person behind you in the store, or the single mom who's wrestling with 3 kids, help her out, or say something nice. Like, these are the things that change the world. I think a lot of times we do, especially as leaders, we're all visionaries, right? We get these big, massive ideas, but I think changing the world a lot of times just happens. And I know it sounds cliche, but those small little things that we do every day.
It is so true. And I just started to volunteer for the Red Cross over here because I had the same thought. It was just like, with the war in Ukraine and everything going on, like, what is one thing that I can do right now to help support others? So it doesn't have to be like, we don't all have to start those huge nonprofits. We can start right here, right now, and support others in any way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I know, again, all this stuff sounds cliche, but I found it to be true that, helping other people, serving other people, what that does, it gives you sort of a chemical, you're a biologist, you might know, but it feels like something is released in me when I feel like I do even something, even if I'm in traffic and I let somebody in that maybe had no right to get in, right? Like, you just hold off and let somebody kind of get in there that was maybe trying to cheat the system, or, being kind is just one of those things where it does release something chemically, I feel like, in me. I think for a lot of people, okay, it does. Okay, good. But it does, it sounds cliche, but just integrate that into your leadership, integrate that into your business. Just be intentional about helping other people. And again, small ways, man, the Red Cross thing, that's an amazing thing. And you're on the right side of history, right? You can look back in your life, and part of your legacy is that you were a person that helped people. And I think as I get older, legacy is important to me. And I want my legacy to include, he was somebody that came to the aid of people. He was somebody that was kind. He was empathetic. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but he always tried to help other people. Now, some people don't care about that being part of their legacy, and that's fine. But for those of you who are out there listening going, man, when I'm dead, when I'm gone, and people are talking about me, hey, do you remember Sally? Do you want that part of that to be, man, she just tried to help people? If so, then be intentional about it. Hoping people say that isn't going to make it work. Doing it is going to make it work.
Exactly. That's actually a question I like to ask coaching clients. Just imagine what it would be like when you're approaching your death, so you're on your deathbed, what do you want people to say about you and about your life? And looking at this through the review mirror and just, what do I have to do to get to that point? That's so powerful because it really flips everything on its head, and it allows you to be more intentional about what's really important to you.
Starting with the end in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So with all the amazing things that you have achieved so far, what do you think the future holds for you? So what are your personal and business goals that you're working toward right now?
Yeah, I'm really transitioning to more of a mentoring role. I love that. So, I do coaching, consulting, training, meeting facilitation, all this kind of stuff, but more and more as those opportunities come in, I broker those out. I delegate those to other people because I enjoy them, but I don't enjoy them as much as I used to. What I love now is just people that are, man, I'm just, I need somebody that I can call if I'm struggling with something. Serving that role that was served for me 15 years ago on the Stone Arch Bridge in Minneapolis when I was unhappy. I want to be that for people. So I'm doing more mentoring. So it's kind of like coaching, but it is different. But it's really just being available, being accessible, being that person that people can call. I love that. And then doing more speaking. So I'm really trying to take this message of happiness out to the world. So doing more and more of that. So I've done a lot of speaking, but it's always been kind of here, there, TEDx, this, whatever. I'm really trying to focus in on how can I help people understand the power of being happier and how do we actually get there personally. So mentoring and speaking is really where I want to go with more of my business. And then I've managed to build a business to the point where as some of those other things come in, now I have a team that I can broker those other things out to.
That sounds great. Best of luck with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And last but not least, where can our listeners find you online if they would like to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on social media kind of everywhere, but really the most active I'm on is LinkedIn. So I do a video every weekday called Steve's Daily Stool, which is intentional. That's intentional. Like people are like, do you know what that means? I'm like, yeah, I know what that means. It's intentional. I'm trying to show people my funny side, but it's really just a few minutes of me sort of sharing my thoughts for the day or some insights that I've had. So LinkedIn is the number one social media site for me. And then there's a couple of websites. If you're interested in sort of the small business support side of it, smallbusiness.com. And then more of my speaking mentoring side is stevefredlund.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. I've got so many questions for you as a biologist, but I guess that'll have to come at another time.
Let's chat sometime.
All right, let's do it.
Take care and talk to
you
soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.